I'm going to ask you each one kind of a more targeted question at first, and you guys also think about what you want to ask our panelists today. So, Professor, first question to you. Ricard touched on this topic, and you are an expert in computational biology, probably exposed a lot to evolution and mechanics, how it worked. I want to get your opinion, your perspective on the dilemma that exists right now in terms of centralization versus decentralization, in terms of alignment versus more risk and diversity. So let me pass this to you. In terms of
perfect.
Yeah. In terms of alignment versus more risks and diversity, specifically meaning that, well, we as humans are very diverse. We have diverse cultures. Joanna lived in Greece and France. Ricard lived in Sweden. I lived in Ukraine. We are brought in different environments, and the evolution might have been pushed by our differences. But now we have a very defragmented AI, defragmented organization, defragmented society in terms of who's pushing AI forward. They are implementing their own AI alignment systems. They're reducing the diversity, but potentially also reducing biases and stereotypes that have already existed in society. So we kind of have a dilemma between high risks, but more opportunity for innovation, or lower risks and lower opportunity for innovation. What's your perspective on that, coming from biology, evolution, and things around that?
Fantastic question, extremely rich, extremely deep, broad-reaching, etc. So let me start with biology a little bit. So basically, as you mentioned, sort of humans are forced to be diverse. We don't have a choice. We basically have genetic variation that modifies every aspect of our brain and of our body and of our behavior and of our inclinations and so on and so forth. I have 3 children. You know, they are completely different from each other. And they were completely different when they first came out, and they're still completely different now. And as much as we would love to, as parents, think that nurture matters a lot, it's only about 50%. And another 50% is just like nature, and there's very little you can do about that. And that's, I think, part of the beauty of humanity, the fact that whether we like it or not, we're all programmed to actually think differently, to interpret things differently, to etc. And that's just the nurture component. The nature component also, sorry, that's the nature component. The nurture component also gives us extraordinary diversity in sort of where we grew up, the things that we saw as cultural references at different points in our lives, as you mentioned, different cultures, different families, even in the same sort of street block. You're going to have kids growing up with completely different perspectives on life. And I think that's what makes MIT work. That's what makes any team work. The fact that we think differently and we can bounce ideas with each other with mutual respect, but also completely different perspectives. And that shapes the ideas very interestingly. So I think one way to achieve that with AI, even with a single underlying large language models, is to instill different personalities in a set of agents that are interacting together in the same system. So that forces the agent to actually process ideas in different ways. So if you want to have the most creative solutions, you don't want a single AI that's going to give some average. You want a lot of different AIs that are going to be bouncing off each other, each with their own personality. And you can encode that. You can give them personalities. You can basically say, you know, you are a professor who grew up in Iran and who has, you know, these kinds of backgrounds. You are a waiter who grew up in, I don't know, Scandinavia and has this background, etc. And then based on these personalities, you can sort of build a life story and a set of attributes for each of the agents and then push them towards more creativity. In terms of bias, we all worry so much that AI will be biased, but I have to say that humans have a terrible track record on bias. We are horrible when it comes to bias. And I see AI as a hope for being able to not just de-bias, but anti-bias our thoughts, to be able to sort of artificially tag on different biases with different attributes and push us off our comfort zone in terms of expectations and have the AI push itself off its comfort zone. So you can basically create, again, these personalities with very different stereotypes and with mismatch of these stereotypes, and sort of have the AIs interact with those and actually learn how to uncouple those biases. So that's on the bias, a little bit on the diversity. And in terms of the centralization, again, I think the scenario of Skynet in Terminator is exactly one of centralization. It's basically us versus the AI. And I think that the forces of the market are such that as centralization happens in one direction, you will have forces pushing against it in the other direction. And there are laws against monopoly. There are antitrust laws that are sort of going to kick in if we see that, in fact, centralization is pushing too far. And I think that's healthy. I think that the forces of the market are healthy. I think that the best way to combat the Skynet scenario of the AI apocalypse is not to pause AI, it's to double down and to sort of, expand out and to democratize and to sort of, provide opportunities for many others to build on the same architectures, on the same hardware, on the same software, and sometimes even on OpenAI to basically create diverse agents on top of it. And that's what we saw a few months ago with the ChatGPTs, the fact that everyone can program their own AI, and even if there's an underlying architecture, you can still have diversity in the utilizations and in the outcomes.
Okay, so thank you. That's very interesting. And I do think that saying that you have one single big AI that you incorporate different personalities into, it sounds like if you take the biology and evolution similarity, like, well, all of humankind would share a single brain, that would be prompted differently. And that sounds like, well, why don't humanity have a single brain? Because it's very fragile. If it screws up, we're all screwed. So I see what I mean? I think it's, if you have such a big thing, it's gonna, even if it's just less biased, it's gonna be biased systemically in exactly the same way for all of those users, right? Well, a human being exactly is very biased, but differently so, which is, I think, much more in line with nature and evolution, which I think is great guiding stars. So, like, since you work with this, I feel also, because the last thing you pointed as well, that let's just push through, right? But like, what can we learn in terms of innovation and change from nature? Well, most of change is bad, and how we understand that is by the passing of time. So, like, if you push things very, very quickly, what systems like evolution will understand what's bad innovation is going to kill us and what's not if we don't give it enough time to see the effects? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. These are great ideas. So basically on the first comment of the single brain, many personalities, even if you have a single giant LLM, it has 5 billion parameters. If you look at the human brain, the way that thought happens, it's not a single thought. Like, all of our neurons rarely fire together. You basically have communities within our brain. You have engrams that are firing together. You have a central sort of memory module, if you wish, which is the hippocampus, but even it basically connects to a bunch of different parts of the brain, and a bunch of different sort of memories are sort of co-firing at once. And the way that we're interpreting the world is also multimodal. You basically have visual cues, auditory cues, emotional cues, cognitive cues, written, verbal, auditory. Like, there's a huge diversity of inputs and a huge diversity of references that even a single brain has. And even within ChatGPT, if I'm interacting with a single chat, with a single user, with a single personality, if you look at the underlying architecture, a lot of researchers are basically suggesting that, in fact, it's a community of models that is cobbled together. That basically even the answers that you get from seemingly a single chat, a single interaction, are in fact a plurality of these interaction, a sort of diversity of interactions. So basically, I don't expect a single mode of thinking. And if you look at even ChatGPT, even if you had a single mode of thinking, there's the temperature parameter that basically tells you how close are you to the best solution versus how much are you lowering that probabilistically to basically give a diversity of perspectives. And the best models are running at 0.8, not 1.0. And basically that tells us that inherently, if I ask exactly the same questions, I'm going to get slightly different answers every time. So diversity is almost built in, even in a single system.
But do you have what's the most similar system in nature to this that you propose? Like, is there any, can you be like, well, it's safe because nature also has an inspiration for us here. You see what I mean?
So I would say the World Wide Web is the closest thing, where basically all humans have different cognitive modes, and yet we have a shared exchange marketplace for ideas. And basically you can think of all of the billions of web pages as the neurons of ChatGPT in a way. And basically all of us are interacting with some common knowledge frame, but every one of us is basically making connections with the subset. The second comment that I wanted to get at is change being bad. And I like to say that if evolution was flawless, if human engineers had designed a flawless replicating machine, we would still be, to this day, perfectly replicating bacteria. So basically what makes evolution work is breaking things. It's like, climate change, it's asteroids. I mean, we here in this room would not be around if it wasn't for the Chicxulub, asteroid that basically wiped out the dinosaurs 60 million years ago. Mammals had been around for about 30 million years and had just never escaped from their holes because they would just make such a lovely breakfast every time they stuck their head out to these giant dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs ruled the earth for 175 million years. We have been around since their extinction for only 60 million years, and we diverged from chimps only 5 million years ago. Basically, the primates have only been around for 5 million years, and the human lineage only 1 million years. So I just want to give you a little bit of perspective. There's no such thing as, evolution is so wonderful and perfect. The only reason cognition is ruling in this earth is because of an asteroid.
But, so the dinosaurs died out? Or are you saying that, I'm not saying change is bad. I think change is inevitable. We're not changing as quickly as other like virus or something, but the dinosaurs were pretty fragile. They died. Humanity might die. Is that a good thing then, right? Because you're taking the dinosaurs as an example, and I think that a comet hitting Earth is a very rapid change that we're not used to, and all of dinosaurs died. And I think yes, AI can be a similar thing if change happens too quickly and we're not robust to it, we're not anti-fragile, because change is inevitable, right? So it's sure. It's not bad, but if we die out as humanity and some other more anti-fragile life from Earth takes over, I think that's the outcome we don't want. Does that make sense? But we don't want to be the dinosaurs. We want to be a little bit more smart in how we build our system.
Let me be just completely blunt. Basically, AI has no will to take over. In fact, I could have stopped that sentence at AI has no will, period. We evolved with a set of evolutionary constraints of scarce resources, competition, cooperation for our kin, gene level selection, basically selfish gene selection, where a gene for altruism will be selected if it is beneficial for the species that carries it, and so on and so forth. So basically all of these things that have made humanity have wars, but also save, children, and stop for truces even when the bosses are saying kill each other, the soldiers on the field will basically sort of make a truce. I think there's so many different complex aspects of humanity, but the urges that pushed natural evolution to scarcity, competition for food, competition for mating, for progeny, for speed of replication, etc., they do not apply to AI. And if you look at the path again of all of life, at least the lineage near us, you basically see this move to higher and higher levels of abstraction. Basically, very early on in life, you basically have chemotaxis, which basically means turning to where the chemical gradient is to find the density, the higher density of food molecules, and therefore the source of the food. Chemotaxis eventually got replaced with, that was smell. It eventually got replaced with vision, being able to see stuff and better catch it. Then eventually a central nervous system that integrates the information from multiple sources. And eventually this appendage, like between your ears, that basically grew larger and larger and larger for integrating more and more information. At the source, however, we started from food replication. AI doesn't have any of that. It started with a brain, and it started with solving problems, and it doesn't have will, and it doesn't have agency, and it doesn't have any desire to take over. If there is such a weaponization of AI, It is the humans behind it. It is not the AI.
Yeah, I'm not saying that AI has a will at all. I don't think that's not the point. It's just a lot of change happening quickly, and human beings, I guess, we can definitely kill ourselves by using AI in the wrong ways. So it's not that AI has a will or anything. And I would say AI is just part of technology development. Would you say that humanity is more robust now to extinction than it was 2,000 years ago? Do you think it's more robust today than it was then?
If you look at the diversity of human populations, you can basically measure the density of population over time by taking any pair of humans from any population. You can basically see across the entire genome what is the time to the most recent ancestor of coalescence of the alleles in any one chromosome. That basically tells you if a lot of them coalesce here and then there's a gap and a lot of them coalesce here, that basically tells you about low diversity, high diversity, and so on and so forth in the human population itself. So you can actually trace the size of the human population over time. And we almost went extinct several times. So humanity has almost disappeared several times. We were down to a population of a few hundred and somehow resurfaced. So yes, we have been very fragile. The other thing I want to say is when people say, oh, AI can be dangerous, let's wait 6 months. It sounds like, oh, this fire thing that we just invented is very dangerous. Maybe we should wait a few 100,000 years. It's very similar in my view. And yes, fire is extremely dangerous. It can burn your houses. It can basically wipe out your colony. It can burn your fields. It can basically lead to famine. Fire is extremely dangerous. But fire is also what allows us to cook our foods, to change our diet, to basically have the necessary energetic resources to grow our brains and to basically develop into modern humans. And in my view, AI is a tool. It's just a fancy typewriter. It's the next generation of computers. It's the next generation of the book. The book led to extraordinary changes in civilization. Extraordinary. By spreading knowledge. The internet accelerated all that exponentially by sharing knowledge way faster. BioArchive and Archive and Wikipedia and YouTube and all of these different tools for learning have dramatically accelerated the spread of knowledge. And what AI is right now, these chatbots, they are the integration of that knowledge. So you don't have to go and read 1,000 documents. You can just get some kind of average answer right away. And I think this is, of course, a great accelerator. Of course, it will lead to climate change. It will lead to more energy utilization. It will lead to more CO2. I mean, don't get me wrong. We are almost killing our planet. We are basically in a very fragile state for the world as we know it. That does not mean humans will go extinct. That just means that a lot of other species will go extinct. That means that we will change the way that we understand life around us, etc. And there's enormous conservation efforts to combat this horrible thing that's happening to our planet and to the other species, etc. But that just comes with the increasing entropy of progress. And this has been happening for thousands of years. This is not a new thing. This exponential that we're riding seems steeper because we are on it, and it always seems steeper exactly where you are than a little bit ago, just because of how exponentials are. But if you zoom out all the way, every single time it looks like the same exponential. So I don't think much has changed right now. I don't think we are insurmountably doomed in terms of climate. I think that it's very dire. I completely agree, and we need to do massive amounts for it. And we should, and we will, and AI will be our partner there. I think being able to find better materials, better biofuels, better, all of these things require 100 times more scientists than we have now, 100 times more engineers than we have now. We are not about to lose our jobs. I think that we are about to hit a period of productivity that's unprecedented in the history of humanity, and that's the only way to overcome the crisis that we have in education, where children don't have enough time with teachers, where patients don't have enough time with doctors, where the elderly don't have enough time with home cares, where parents don't have enough time with their children or their parents, or basically we are stretched so thin. The only saving grace of this current instability, in my view, is massive changes in productivity. And AI is part of that solution.
All right.
Okay,
Let's.
Yeah, we have.
I love how differently we think, and I'm enjoying this debate. And if you
Yeah.
took the other position, I'm sure I would take yours.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have amazing speakers today, an amazing topic. I guess this fuels the conversation and fuels the discussion. But I think we are ready to take questions from the audience.
Take it away. Be provocative. Be challenging.
Okay,
Tell us what we
please
got
go
wrong,
ahead.
or what we're not even thinking of.
So along the lines of what we're discussing, I do think that with the advent of data science and compute power, we are, with analysis of data, we are uncovering a lot of correlations and causations, and therefore we're automating a lot that before we could not automate. And maybe it's us, how do we adapt to the new realities of the automation, right? Do we let the autonomous car kill the baby, or the old lady if it's inevitable, right? Those are the things that we need to question. But one of the things I do worry is that because this is so powerful, is massive productivity gains, you can have a change in the world order. And what you described before is we have China, we have Europe, we have the United States. And I think that's a real threat. And I wanted to see what's your view, position, and or prediction in that case.
I can start with the dilemma of, do you want to kill the grandma or the child? And maybe I'm a horrible parent, but I asked this to my children. I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And I said, okay, great. Let's talk about ethics. Let's talk about these dilemmas. You have a self-driving car. What should he do? And at first they're like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. I'm like, okay, that means that you're inherently assigning a value of worthiness to different humans. Is that what you, and they're like, no, life is priceless. You can't compare. And then they're like, do nothing. And in fact, that's what most humans eventually come to. Basically, there's this paradox where if you're steering the train, taking an action to save 5 people and to kill 1 grandma, basically is an action that most humans are just not able to ever cope with. And then what they will choose is inaction and possibly killing 5, people instead of, killing 1. So humans just have no ability to sort of choose to kill in order to save. This is not within the way that we're wired. And apparently this was demonstrated in my own kids, within like a few minutes of this conversation. The second one about the world order, I agree completely. We are, basically AI is putting everything back to the drawing table. I think that the traditional areas of competition are superseded by the competition in this realm. And geopolitics are shaping AI, and AI is shaping geopolitics. So I think you cannot think about innovation abstractly without the context of the geopolitical area and spectrum that you live in, that is shaping the innovation, the way you're thinking, the types of financing, the types of applications, etc. And I don't know if I have a right answer, except that yes, I agree completely that this is shaped not just in one direction, but in both directions.
All right. More questions?
Any more questions? Okay.
Yeah, you dodged who was going to win. That was good. So clicking on like the geopolitical climate, tomorrow afternoon, the Sloan Embas are going to have a debate on the impact of AI on unemployment globally in aggregate, and how that's going to play out for different countries and different economic situations. Interested in some of your thoughts on that.
So again, I'm an optimist. I basically see AI as liberating millions of humans from the state that they're in. Children who are too challenged by school, who cannot follow, can ask their own personal AI tutor, which is available at the push of a button, for help to get unstuck, to ask the quote-unquote dumb questions. Children who are at the top of their class, with their brain oozing out because they're so bored, can ask their own personal AI tutor to basically push them to the limits of their own capabilities. So I see AI as lifting up the human race across all countries of the world. I see also nearly all current jobs being extinct in 5 to 10 years. Every single job we have now will have to be dramatically rethought. The like I would say 80% of the way you spend your time will be different. Your job might still be called that, but 80% of your time will be doing something completely different. And a lot of it will be working with your AI agents to basically, execute probably a lot more than you were able to do before. There will be new jobs created completely. So I'm not as worried about unemployment, at least in the short term of 5 to 10 years. I expect many, many more jobs will be created. But what I am worried about is exactly what you mentioned, that these jobs will be created in very different places than the places where they're getting lost. So call centers will disappear in India. Will they be, will that also be the place where the new, I don't know, prompt engineering or, just to give the typical example, jobs will be created? It's unclear. So basically, there might be dramatic shift in capital across the world. But my overall view and hope is dramatic increases in productivity and a raise of the global standard of living, of well-being, of cognition, of thought, of engagement, of motivation, and so on and so forth. I think at least the short term will be extraordinarily productive. The long term, there will be existential questions of, am I needed in society anymore? But if you look at many periods of the Renaissance and sort of ancient Greece, etc., theater in ancient Greece was free for the citizens. It was like, provided because they had sufficient wealth that they could support the arts. I'm hoping that the spirit of productivity will come also with a flourishing of innovation, of creativity, of the arts, of the not necessarily needed for my survival and for my kids, but more like places of interest and hobbies.
Quick follow-up. I share your optimism. I thought about it a little bit differently in that long term we'll get to that. Sorry. I share your optimism, but I thought about it differently, that long term we'll get to that positive place, and we'd have a short term challenge where folks they'd be out of their job and would need to get retrained. And it wouldn't be equal because folks that were just like nearing retirement, it'd be harder for them to get retrained. Thought workers who are used to learning new skills would pick up on things, but folks that were labor intensive manufacturing might be more difficult to retool.
I'm with you there on the short term, but I don't see dramatic changes of jobs in this immediate short term. I think that AI still has a long way to go before it can replace jobs. For now, it will be augmenting jobs at least in the first few years.
Yeah, and also to reflect on that, as a person working on AI agents, I see this right now in the industry, this transformation, the shift, the talks about human in the loop, the talks about giving out accountability, also having control ourselves. So yeah, this is very good topic. I want to, since we are touching more on the regulation side, Ricard, I wanted to ask you the question now as a kind of a researcher, or even like just a person. Considering your lecture and what you discussed about regulations, so what do you think? No regulations or some regulations or a lot of regulations? Again, dilemma, right? No regulations give us freedom for innovation, but increases risks. Some regulations might even not perfect one, reduce our capability to innovate. But on the other hand, it protects us from say, cyber warfare happening and things around that, deep fakes, utilization of our private information and so on. What do you think about that?
So of course, the answer has to be probably some regulation. I do think, I think maybe regulation is not the right way to think about it. Building a system where regulations aren't needed, maybe that's what we should aspire to. And that's like just flipping the perspective a little bit, because typically when we think about regulation, it's like, well, we have these giant players, we're going to regulate them. It's like, well, maybe if we have small localized player, we don't need a type of regulation because it's going to self-regulate. And I think self-regulation is great, it's very anti-fragile and very, something that actually, I think if you look historically, it's been very, very successful. When we self-regulate locally, instead of having this global system, we try to kind of regulate on a global scale. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I think that's what I would say.
What I'm concerned about is regulatory capture. Basically, the concept that the big players will be able to cope with regulation because they have the resources to do so. And if we ask AI to be interpretable, to be traceable, to be fair, to never be biased, to never be racist, etc., then there's like 3 or 4 players at most that will be able to cope with that regulation, and all of the little guys will die. So I'm a little concerned about that. Basically, my how do we achieve this without without stifling innovation? And my take on this is the human using it is ultimately responsible. I don't want a car that will prevent me from, going on the sidewalk or avoiding a collision or you name it, because it stifles my roles with it. Basically, I want rules that prevent people from killing others with their cars. Basically, the car is absolutely a weapon, but changing the car so that it cannot be used as a weapon basically means that the 99.9999999% of users will be not able to be as safe anymore, not be able to sort of, be as fast or as sort of dense on the highway, and so on and so forth. So I think that if you want to make an AI that will just never say anything racist, you will just stifle all the little players. If instead you punish the user who basically now spews out racist rhetoric by using AI, then AI goes back to being the tool rather than the agent. So I feel that right now we're kind of delegating responsibility for the action to the AI. The action should stay with the human. And then the regulation becomes much easier because the user is ultimately responsible. And it's not about, can I jailbreak the system so that it says nasty things? No, just like if you say nasty things, you're responsible. I'm sorry, it's not the AI.
I think we have time for the last question from the audience, if anybody have something. Okay. Some exercise.
So, like, artificial intelligence is inherently tied to the data we use to train it on, right? So, like, large language models, there's been lots of controversy on where do we get that data from, who owns the data, like, how is it related, especially in, like, biology, too, when you're using, like, people's genes. How do you foresee this, like, how do we continue to use and, like, innovate in AI when, like, I guess the data kind of question is going to always be there of, like, whose it is, how do we regulate it, how do we distribute it effectively? Like, I just want to see your opinions on where that's going to go in the future as that gets more and more of a challenging question.
It's a question about privacy mostly. Yeah.
What was the last one you made? Privacy? Yeah. So let me answer that at first. Basically, yes, absolutely. The New York Times has been taken advantage of by OpenAI, no doubt about that. That said, a book. I'm reading a book. I'm now writing something that's inspired by that book. That's what we call, academia. That's what we call, research. That's what we call academic work. Basically, if you steal from one source, it's plagiarism. If you steal from 100 sources, it's research. So in my view, OpenAI, yes, absolutely stole from the New York Times, but not uniquely from the New York Times. And the question is, at what point will a lawsuit that prevent OpenAI from training on the New York Times will suddenly prevent me from doing research because everything is copyrighted? The other thing is plagiarism has an enormous gradient. And I can take 1,000 articles written on a given topic and basically align them. That's what we do in genomes all the time. We do genome alignment. And we have tools for basically aligning every New York Times article to an article that precedes it that is almost identical. So basically, if you open that can of worms, then where is human innovation? Because everything is a gradient. There's very little that I can write or that anyone can write or that an AI can write that hasn't been kind of said before. And I think there's a song about that. Woo-hoo-hoo. I feel that we need to rethink what innovation means. We need to rethink what attribution is. We need to rethink what novelty and what plagiarism is and what research and integration is. And in my view, AI is really about integration of knowledge. It's not about copying. you really have to go out of your way to get ChatGPT to spit out a whole New York Times article. It's very, very hard. They may have managed to, but in very weird sort of esoteric scenarios. Most of the time, it's going to be some kind of integration, and the New York Times will not be the only place where that sentence appeared. And if you want to start suing people, then everybody's in trouble. There was an experiment with music and melodies that was done recently, where basically a group, I think at the Media Lab, basically created just every possible melody systematically, and then just put it all in the public domain, basically saying, listen, stop suing each other. Melodies are finite, and you know, we've kind of created them all. In some way, human thought might be finite, and I'm hoping that the boundaries will be pushed by exposing the mundane, and then sort of recognizing the more innovative. So my hope, again, as an optimist, is that we will push the frontiers of human creativity, and that this will reach a new level that we don't have to worry about the pettiness of similarity of small text, but really about the leaps that we can make going forward.
Yes, I have a comment. Okay, so I don't know how much time we have left, but I mean, I think I'm also very optimistic about the future in AI. I really am. But I think, I mean, what I really do think, and the pessimist part is that, like, I don't trust our own thinking and beautiful ideas and theories. I'm much more pragmatic, and I think that's important moving forward as technologies. Just being like, well, let's not assume that we're going to be able to figure everything out, or that research is going to be able to, decide all the questions about what's going to happen in the future. I think we have to be pragmatic and try things, and yeah.
Also, my comment, I'm very optimistic about the future of AI, but not that optimistic about the future of humans. But on the other hand, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we push the evolution further down the road. I mean, essentially. Philosophically, we don't know whether this is good or bad. But anyway,
Can I make a comment?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely.
So genetically, humans are not going to change anytime soon. Just like, let's be blunt. The scale at which and the speed at which things are changing is like, basically, if you look at the curve of how humans have gotten smarter, and we have, is very, very slow. If you look at the speed at how AI has gotten smarter in that scale, it's basically a vertical line. And no matter how much you zoom, it continues to be a vertical line. We're not going to outpace AI by genetic changes. However, if you look at the human brain, there's tiny numbers of changes that made us so much smarter compared to chimps in terms of the speed of neuron replication, the number of divisions, the growth, the waiting before you start fixing. Basically, if a kid develops too fast, then and sort of fixates their neurons too fast, they don't have the ability to grow as much, and sort of we have delayed this growth. So there's a small number of regulatory changes that have sort of made chimps into humans, if you look at the brain. If you now look at how much remains with nurture, how much remains with a small number of pills that you could give to sort of, expand the number of neurons that get created, or the speed of connectivity, or you name it. Basically, we are starting to understand that a lot of the knobs that you can turn to sort of really make human brain, like and biological cognition, dramatically more capable, even with today's understanding and tools. The ethics, of course, are enormously complex. But I'm just saying that we're not going to be seeing genetic changes in humans, but we can see biotechnological and basically biotech changes that sort of push humans to the next level. And that's just humans. If you now add nurture and sort of the way that we train, that's enormously higher. And if you add the human-machine interfaces, that's enormously higher as well. So basically, I see human capabilities as dramatically expanded without any changes to our hardware, without any change of the ones that I just mentioned, just by using AI agents and sort of pushing further. And allowing kids to be more creative in mathematics, in physics, in all of these other areas, because the rate limiting step will no longer be the teachers. I feel that high school teachers have their own limitations. They're humans. But if you replace the extraordinary empathy of the teacher and you augment it, if you augment the empathy of the teacher with the knowledge and capabilities of AI and the whole world, then suddenly teachers don't have to be constrained by the stuff that they understand deeply. No, they can enable their students to understand stuff way more deeply than they do. And I think if we approach this with humility, we can let children dramatically increase the pace of learning. So I think that the moment AI is in the picture and we want to push humans to new heights, we haven't even begun to tap that. And I think AI will be our partner there. Sorry.
Do you want to comment, Ricardo? We are quite over time, but yeah.
I mean, I think that, of course, I think it sounds great, and I think I agree with you a lot. I just think that there is a lot of uncertainty in a lot of the outcomes, right? There's going to be a lot of great things. There's going to be a lot of bad things. So let's just, take both possibility, every possibility in our consideration, and also the things we don't even think about, right? The unknown unknowns. So there's a lot of things we have very little idea what's going to happen, or what's going to be the outcomes here. So let's, accept that and not assume that we're going to know everything.
Okay, so we're sure that teachers and waitresses, maybe, those who have social skills will survive. We are not sure about everyone else. But anyway, I think that's a good closure for today's topic. Thank you very much for Professor Manuel Esqueles for participating in this panel, and Ricard Bruel Gabrielsen. Thank you. I'm going to pass back to you.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you guys enjoy this conversation? Yeah? Awesome.